Get started. This is Charlie Zelle. I'm chair of the Metro Green Line Extension Corridor Management Committee, and it's great to see everybody. I know that it seems like we just met, but that was September 1st. Here we are, December 1st. And this project is marching along. So I'm just a couple of reminders. This is a virtual meeting. If you have technical issues, kind of let us know in the chat. We have people here who know a lot more about how to fix those problems than I do. Also, I suggest if you're not speaking, to put yourself on mute. And we, after 2 years, really don't need more instruction, but we seem to always need it nonetheless. I also want to thank Sophia, who will be happy to answer any questions from the public. If you are engaging and watching, feel free to email Sophia at Sophia.Ginis, Ginis at metrotransit.org. And if you have questions, you can ask them until Friday, really a week from Friday. And they'll be posted on the website along with answers. So, and I also invite the public to look at our specific website, swlrt.org, and all this CMC work will be on that website, including handouts and presentations, which we will have today. So just as a way to say hello, why don't we ask members of the committee and alternates to introduce yourselves, and as I call out the organization, you can jump right in. So starting with Met Council, we have some Met Council members here.
Chris Ferguson, I represent the sort of western side of Hennepin County, Edenbury, and all the communities around Lake Minnetonka.
Let's see, any other Met Council folks? All right, Hennepin County.
Debbie Gotel, Hennepin County, District 5.
And Chris Latondres is here, Hennepin County, District 6.
Nice, multiple of us. Irene Fernando, District 2 and Rail Chair.
Excellent. All righty, Eden Prairie.
Kathy Nelson, City Council, sitting in for Ron Case Mayor.
Great. Minnetonka.
Good morning, Rebecca Shack, council member from the city of Minnetonka.
Welcome. Hopkins.
Brian Hunke is here, Hopkins City Council member.
Great. St. Louis Park.
Jake Spano, Mayor. Morning, everybody.
Hey, Jake. Minneapolis.
Adam Sala here, alternate to Mayor Frey.
Hi, Andy.
Good morning, everybody. Brett Jelly, Interim Director of Public Works.
Hey, Brad. Edina. I might be jumping in later. MnDOT, I see.
Yep, Mike Barnes, Metro District Engineer.
All right, anybody from Metro Transit other than Met Council members? All right, how about the Community Advisory Committee? Okay, last but not least, our Business Advisory Committee, Will.
Hey, Charlie. Good morning, everyone, and happy belated Thanksgiving. I work at Baker Tilly and co-chair the Business Advisory Committee.
And I am Dan Duffy. I also co-chair the Business Advisory Committee with Will. Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Dan. Welcome. Did I miss anybody? All right. Well, first order of business is the minutes, which were sent out Monday for review. If there's any edits or corrections, you can let us know now, or you can let staff can make revisions. And if not, can I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Cummings moves approval.
Thank you. And a second from Will, and great. Sophia, can you call the roll for the vote on the minutes?
I can. Councilmember Cummings.
Aye.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Aye.
Commissioner Latundras.
Aye.
Commissioner Gotel.
Aye.
Commissioner Fernando.
Aye.
Councilmember Nelson.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunke.
Aye.
I believe Brett Jelly.
Actually, Abdi Salah will take that
Take
vote.
the roll. Abdi Salah.
Aye.
Councilmember Shack.
Aye.
Mayor Spano.
Aye.
Mike Barnes.
Aye.
Will Roach / Dan Duffy.
Aye.
Aye.
And I saw Assad Aliwad, even though he didn't say hi.
Aye.
And Chair Zelle.
Aye. We're tracking everybody, Assad. All right, the minutes are approved. So let's just jump into the substance of the meeting. I know everybody's asked for what's the state of the Green Line. Here we are on another infrastructure week. Very gratifying to have the president come to Minnesota and talk about infrastructure and more infrastructure coming. This is the largest infrastructure project in the state's history. We've done a lot, even in this past half year. So I'll just touch on a few things. One, having actual tracks laid in downtown Hopkins is no small thing, and it's a great sign of progress that we've been making along the entire corridor. And then another highlight for me was also in August when Senator Smith had her remote field hearing for the subcommittee on banking and housing and urban affairs, and really talked about transit priorities, and got a chance to have a tour of elements of the Green Line, particularly around the Royalston stop, how it could be transformative for an area in Minneapolis. Also, kind of interesting of note, we're starting to track actual dollars, not just the budgets, but where the money is going. And I don't know if anybody realizes that so far, 65 out of 87 Minnesota counties are actually have employees who are working on this project. So there are paychecks that are going throughout the state of Minnesota. Just helpful to know that when you hear about greater Minnesota thinking that this is just for Minnesota, for the metro area, it's not true. Also, kind of regarding everybody's interest in more information, we've really ramped up social media. We're ramping up some of our engagements. So we're going to talk about some of the information that we're going to be sharing. Also, we're ramping up tours. We've had tremendous kind of public interest in tours. I'm in the tour business, so I love it. Fortunately, we're not charging any fees for that, but that's a thought. And I think that those of us who kind of see it firsthand, to see one section, you only see in one section, really looking at the entire route, it's just dramatic. Every section has its own story, and it's kind of worth seeing. So I appreciate the CMC. We've tried to organize some tours just for this group, but we'll continue to kind of work on that. We're actually working on a number of tools to support communications and community engagement beyond handouts and tours and one-pagers. I do find it interesting that the standard length of a one-pager is 3 pages, but that's just, that just shows how much information we're sharing in this project. And also videos. So We have one video in particular we could love to show you right now, and this is the moment of a Zoom call where your project team and the video support is biting their lips because, but I have great faith in you, Jason. Hit it. Let's watch that video.
This is the original form of hands-free driving, otherwise known as an LRT train. This, of course, is the Green Line extension, otherwise known as the Southwest Light Rail Project. Why are we building a light rail here? If you're trying to attract businesses to your city, what do you need? You need good schools for their families. You need relatively good housing prices. And then you don't want people sitting in traffic for an hour and a half to get to work back and forth. With one ticket, when it's all done, you can go all the way from Southwest Station to Eden Prairie to St. Paul if you like.
It's good that it got.
It's going to be a beautiful.
All right, I spoke too soon about the challenge of videos.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Jim. There is intended to be audio. It must be having technical difficulties there.
Yeah.
There we go.
There it is.
This is the original form of hands-free driving, otherwise known as an LRT train. This, of course, is the Green Line extension, otherwise known as the Southwest Light Rail Project. Why are we building a light rail here? If you're trying to attract businesses to your city, what do you need? You need good schools for their families. You need relatively good housing prices. And then you don't want people sitting in traffic for an hour and a half to get to work back and forth. With one ticket, when it's all done, you can go all the way from Southwest Station in Eden Prairie to St. Paul if you like. It's going to be a beautiful trip. You're going to be elevated just between here and Hopkins on 5 bridges. And you're going to be above and beyond, going over the highways and in through corridors that you otherwise wouldn't have any access to because previously it was private property. The forecasts of our MPR, Metropolitan Council, down in the Southwest Corridor, I think it's one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing corridor in the state right now. You've got approximately 80,000 plus jobs forecasted in the next 15 or 20 years. So they're forecasting just between the 14.5 miles from Target Field to Southwest Station, something like 55,000 plus people will be living within a half mile of the LRT line. We're even 50% through the civil construction here throughout the whole corridor on average, and I think we've got over $1.5 billion in investment already. And this provides that opportunity for folks to be able to live in the suburbs, and there are many people who don't want to invest, 10 grand or whatever the average fee is for a car. They like transit, they want to go back and forth, and they also want to live out here. So this creates opportunity, right, for reverse commutes, for work, for people to flow back and forth. If you've got somebody who is kind of limited for transportation reasons, time reasons, and they're living in the city, now they have an option. It creates more equity in our system for people to be able to come down here, to go to work, and to get a good paying job down in Eden Prairie. Or whether it's Hopkins, or whether it's St. Louis Park, there's going to clearly be people who are going to benefit economically by having that kind of access down to the suburbs here and create more connectivity between us.
That's great, Jason. Hey, that's that was worth going back and getting right because that music and the video really is inspiring. And I think there'll be more like that. We'll have that on the website, and so share it. I think that as much as we love pictures of this incredible project, I think some of the pictures that inspires me is the actual developments that are already in the ground and that are coming up in every city. And I'm amazed and also humbled that there's such an area of transformation. And really more than just buildings, these are about people, and we need and we'll have more pictures of people eventually using this line. I know that we've talked a lot about these efforts. I want to really thank Hennepin County and each of our cities for all the work that you're doing, because this isn't easy work. It's and it really is tireless in terms of our planning and designing all the construction issues. We talked last time about some of the challenges, and we're going to go deeper into that. We all know we want an opening date, and it would be great. We're coming up to getting that refined, and working closely with the contractors as we kind of resequence how the project is being built. But I will say from my own personal inspections, there's a lot of activity on the line, so I feel like we're making good progress. But challenges, absolutely, and I think that when we look out toward those opening dates, which will be a few years away, we'll want to stay kind of close with all of you as these details kind of start coming out more publicly. So with that, we'll welcome Jim, who is in the project office, hard at work, and you're going to give us kind of a highlight of all the construction activities we've been seeing since we last met. And take it away, Jim.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll run through some information slides on our challenges the chair had spoken of, and we'll have some images to show you progress. So we'll move on to the next slide there, Jason. So the slide you've seen before with the just all the things we're building, quite a bit, 44 structures, the 15 at-grade crossings, and of course, numerous retaining walls. Have a stat sheet coming up to show you where we are on all those items. Next slide. So in terms of our sequencing of getting to the final into revenue service, is kind of been tracking just to show graphically how we're doing here. Utilities are pretty close to being done. Site prep is also pretty much done. The structures, civil construction is honing in about 60% done right now. And as you can see, the systems is just starting to ramp up. We've started some work out in the Eden Prairie area. A lot of work behind the scenes on the system contract. We are producing equipment that'll eventually go out on the site, but so far just out on the line about 2%, and then eventually getting revenue service. We have to do that testing and make sure everything's safe and works well with all the componentry we're putting in place. Next slide. So here's some stats here. We have 11 stations underway of the 16, 25 bridges underway or completed. We have all 8 tunnels under construction. Some are pretty close to being completed, some of the PED tunnels. 114 completed under construction of the retaining walls. I guess we missed the retaining walls there. That's that last bullet there for a whole total 131. And private utilities, 95%. That's pretty significant with given the different many different private utility companies we have to work with on this project. 75% of the public utilities completed, and the demo that's long been completed, and of course systems, as I said, is ramping up. Franklin O&M, I got a couple images on that. That's towards completion, where we've expanded that facility to accommodate the 27 vehicles, and Siemens is delivered 25 of those vehicles now, and we still have 2 out in Sacramento that are finishing up to be shipped out to the Twin Cities area here. Next slide, please. So did want to address the issues here that we've talked about in the past, the key issues that have really just made some challenges to us on given us challenges on the schedule and the budget. The first is the quarter protection wall in the Minneapolis area, and also the Secant Wall. Really, the Canonware Tunnel as a whole is probably the biggest challenge on this whole project, and I'll get to that when we show some slides. We have had to have really pretty significant change orders put in place for both of those elements, and they are now done. And so the contractor is working on those change orders. But as the chair mentioned, primarily the tunnel is impacting the overall project schedule, and schedule will inform the ultimate budget. And so maybe the next slide can kind of walk through this a little bit. So we're trying to clarify what is really going on here. A typical road project, you have one contractor doing the work, and once that contractor is done, you're generally done with the project. You can move on and start running cars. Well, in this case, we have a civil construction contract and then a follow-on systems contract. And so those two need to work in sequence with each other. And we need to understand the civil schedule and the cost with that before we can get finalizing the system schedule and the cost with that. And we are really in the depths with the contractors, talking over schedule, trying to get things lined out. It's been a long year for me personally, working through the schedule and negotiations on that schedule and the cost with that. We are not ready to talk about what our schedule is going to look like until we get these really components in place, and the civil is the first start. But know that we are working towards the civil and the systems to get that understood. But then we also need to understand how the testing is going to be fitted in there and the total cost of this project. So we are just saying right now that we are not going to make 2023 for a revenue service, and we are still working on a revenue service date. But at this juncture, we do not have that date identified, nor we don't have the budget fully identified. As I indicated, the schedule will inform the ultimate cost of the project. I might, Mr. Chair, pause there if there are any questions on these pieces before we get into some imagery here.
Any questions for Jim? And welcome, Mayor Hovland.
Thank you. Sorry, I had another event I had to be at this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to be with all of you.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the photos, Jason. Advance a couple of slides. So we'll start out from the west end like we typically do. This is Southwest Station. What you're seeing here is the parking ramp that we've essentially built out now, and that adjoins the existing ramp that Southwest Transit operates. And kind of off to the left there is a waiting area enclosure that the contractor's working right now. Just above that is a stair and elevator tower that leads up to the top. There's actually two of those towers we're building. One is off to the right side where you can't see the photo, but that work is progressing well. Next slide. So this is just outside of that ramp. You can see just off to the right is the Southwest ramp there. This is a pretty tricky special track work that allows the cars to switch from, or the train vehicles to switch from one track to the other. This is all done in one pour. It's probably the most significant pour that the subcontractor Railworks has done to date, and they're a pretty significant contractor that do this type of work. And so this is the start of the Prairie Center Drive Bridge that will head over Technology and Prairie Center Drive and get up to Eden Prairie, or the Eden Prairie Station. Maybe next slide there, Jason. So this is kind of a nice night shot. The city of Eden Prairie did provide some additional funding to pay for this artwork and the lighting. Get a chance to get down there in the evening. It's kind of a nice look to see the piers there with them lighted up. Next slide, please. So this is the Eden Prairie Town Center Station. Off to the right is a cul-de-sac that it's actually paved now, and the station off to the left. Next slide, please. This is track work. So we have, the chair is right. We started with some track work out in Hopkins, but we now have a lot of track placed down in the Eden Prairie area, particularly on the bridges. This is just, I believe, just south of the 494 bridge that runs along Flying Cloud, where we have track work going on. Next slide, please. We skipped a Valley View Bridge, but a really significant Valley View Bridge is really toward completion. But then we go to the 9 Mile Creek Bridge. That's pretty much the structure is complete, just waiting track work. We'll probably pick up in the springtime next year. Next slide, please. So this leads up to Golden Triangle. You can see some of the finished work of the station here. Next slide, please. And next station, City West Station. As you can see, the structure is starting to take shape there. Next slide. So this is one of the more significant elements of the project, 62 Tunnel, where we tunneled under the two roadway 62. That tunnel is essentially complete. The contractor is currently putting a track in there right now. I think we have an image of that next slide here. Yeah, so there's the track work going on inside there. All right, next slide, please. We were able to open up Santana Roadway Bridge. This is another really tricky area. We had deep excavations, a lot of tricky utilities here. And, you know, I failed to mention some quantities here. We have installed about 95 miles of piles on this project to date. So that's 95 miles. That's pretty significant. We also placed about 200,000 cubic yards of concrete. So this area is part of that. We have 2 roadway bridges that you saw in that video showing the Feltel roadway bridge in construction. This is the Santana bridge that's right adjacent to it, and the LRT, of course, is going underneath that. Next slide, please. This is the Minnetonka-Hopkins LRT bridge that lifts off from that Feltel-Santana area and goes across the wetland, eventually over the railroad tracks and lands into the Shady Oak area. Next slide, please. So the Shady Oak Station is coming along pretty well. Next slide. And downtown Hopkins, it's actually a lot more finished work is in place from what this photo is showing. So things are moving along. This actually segment is called a segment 9 that is kind of what you're going to see when you see a completed project. So if you get a chance to get out there, it's not quite complete, but the system still needs to be installed. But in terms of the civil work, you can kind of get an idea of what this thing is going to look like when we're at grade. Next slide, please. This is the Excelsior Boulevard LRT bridge that crosses over the railroad tracks and the roadway. This bridge is coming along pretty well. I know there's been a lot of impacts to the roadway system. We now have Excelsior open, thank goodness, but we'll probably have some closures next year as we finish this connection over to the west side of the west abutment there. This bridge is coming along pretty well. Next slide. I see a note. Yes, we'll make this presentation available to everyone here. This is just kind of to show you the busyness inside this structure. Essentially, it's a concrete box girder bridge. It gets post tension, so there's essentially tendons running along the length of the bridge that get tightened up, cinched up, if you will. That's kind of the word I use to strengthen the bridge. We have a 400-foot crossing that goes over Excelsior Boulevard there, so it needs to be a pretty stout structure to make that span work. Next slide, please. This is Blake Road pedestrian underpass is one of our challenging areas, but we now have the tunnel is in place. And we have roadway traffic, both northbound and southbound, at least one way through the winter here, and work will be picking up again to finish up this area in the 2022. Next slide, please. Louisiana Avenue Station. This is a lot of things going on here. This is where a lot of the piles went to. Soft soils up through here. But we are currently working on the LRT bridge. The freight and the pedestrian bridges have already been put in place. Next slide, please. This is part of that subway connector. This is that freight rail connection that will link what's called the Bass Lake Spur that runs parallel to the SWLRT, the Green Line extension, and it'll connect. You kind of see off in the distance. There's a freight bridge that goes over the LRT off in the distance between these two concrete pieces, and that's called the M&S freight line owned by CP. This southerly connector will eventually be a connection for the Bass Lake Spur to that M&S line to the left of this, or sorry, to the right of this picture here. Next slide, please. So Beltline Boulevard Station is coming along pretty well. You can see off in the distance, there's the PED bridge that's in place. And next slide, please. So 2 photos here kind of jumbled together, but I wanted to give you folks an idea of what this is looking like. And if, you know, I recommend if you have opportunity, I'd be glad to take you out to show you what this looks like, because I think it really, you almost need to see this in person to see what the magnitude of this. But off to the left is the tunnel looking toward the Secant. That's a 10-story condominium building, the Cedar Isles Condominium Association building, and we're essentially going right next to that. And it's very tight. And of course, the freight railroad is on the opposite side, on the right side. So you can see what those members are going across are called struts, and they essentially hold up the walls, which are essentially composed of sheet piles that so it allows the contractor to build the tunnel box within that space there. Contractor is starting to progress nicely on this. We've had a lot of challenges on this piece, primarily with installing the sheet piles. This tunnel is about a half mile in length, and we had a lot of delays in getting the sheets in. We had some settlement issues that were associated with that. We've had to augment our plan. I mentioned the Secant Wall earlier. The contractor is currently installing the Secant Wall next to that big tower, and off in the distance on that photo there, you can see off to the left. But the contractor's starting to make production on this. This is one of the key pieces, is really trying to understand what the civil schedule is going to land on. And the contractor needs a good amount of production behind them to understand what it's going to take to get this thing going, because we still have a long ways to go to get this piece built. And this is really the critical path of the project. Next slide, please. So just further to the east, this is the Cedar Lake Channel LRT bridge. Off to the left, we built the freight bridge that's in use now. We got got rid of the old rickety bridge that was in use for several years. And so I think the concrete's actually placed on this now. And they'll eventually have a new pedestrian bridge off to the right, but that's going to be still in place for access to get through here. That's one of the tricky things through here. Those photos showed previously where the tunnel was. There's really no room to work here. It's a linear access, so it just poses challenges for the contractor to get access to bring concrete in and do all the work they need to do. Next slide, please. So just to east, we're at the West 21st Street Station, coming along nicely here. And next slide. So this is the quarter protection wall. This is where they're putting in drilled shafts. I don't have the exact number. I think they're like it's toward the number of 600 drilled shafts all told for this endeavor. And the next images will show you what that protection barrier looks like. Maybe next slide there. So this is at the Loose Line Trail Bridge. We are just west of the Van White Bridge, which you'll see in the next image. But this is a pier for the new trail bridge. We'll go over to the park area and take us over to the Bassett Creek Valley Station. And you can see down below, that's essentially the quarter protection wall that's being built. And in this image, that's the Van White Boulevard Bridge that the station, Bassett Creek Valley Station, will essentially be in this location where we're looking. Next slide, please. This is another tricky area, Glenwood Avenue, where we have 3 bridges we're building to replace the existing, well, the previous Glenwood Avenue bridge. You can see those piers kind of running through. That's where the LRT is going to be running. And you can see that kind of larger pier in the middle of the image here. That's an abutment for one of the roadway bridges. So essentially you have 2 roadway bridges on either side of an LRT bridge. So the LRT will be crossing at the roadway grade. We still have quite a bit of work to do up in this area to be able to get this roadway open. And we're working pretty actively on this issue. Next slide, please. So moving towards the end of the project, this is the LRT bridge over 5th Avenue and 7th Street that will eventually take us around and link us into Target Field Station. All right. Maybe I'll pause if there are any questions on the civil piece before I move on to the systems contract.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I had one. Jim Hovland here.
Yeah.
Jim, the barrier wall, the protection wall that the railroad required, what kind of structural integrity was required there to make sure that it was effective?
Mr. Chair, Mayor, a very robust system. We have drilled shafts that go down, I don't know if they actually go down to bedrock, but they go down pretty deep to provide pretty extensive lateral resistance. That wall, I mean, I forget what the spacing is on those shafts, but they're pretty closely spaced. So if there were an impact from a freight rail, should there be a derailment, that wall is built and constructed to be able to withstand that freight from fouling the LRT guideway. So it's a very stout bridge, stout structure. The wall itself is about 10 feet high above rail on the freight rail side. On the LRT side, it's probably varies from 4 to 8 feet, depending on the grade, because we're a little bit higher. But it had to go through really a rigorous review. BNSF had said that we need to follow the high-speed rail model that they used out in California, because that's what they were familiar with. And we also had to have MnDOT essentially walk through the design as we were moving through it. So we had both BNSF and MnDOT kind of looking over our shoulders to make sure that this thing was going to be doing what it needed to do, if it ever is needed. Hopefully it's never needed.
Yeah, good. That's helpful. I was certain that it was robust. I just wanted to hear more about it because they were so insistent on it, and it was such an expensive addition to what we needed to do.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's a good point to bring up, Mayor. And also, it was clearly more robust than originally anticipated. And also, as I understand it, and Jim, you can fill it in, but we're actually constructing that massive structure under, in the ground and above, while right next to the active BNSF rail. So I mean, this isn't the DCW twice a day. This is active Class 1 rail at higher speeds, and you're building something right next to it. That, I think, has posed an additional challenge.
Yeah, that's right, Chair. This is Class 1. BNSF runs a lot of trains through here. I think there's almost 100 a week. And anytime there's a potential for fouling the track, if our freight is coming through, we got to stop the work and wait for that train to pass. So it is disruptive. And that's where the expense came, because this is essentially a change order. We actually did look at to see if we could go with a separate contractor to do the work, but it's so embedded, so ingrained to what we have in place already. Like I said, the LRT is about, it's a couple of maybe 4 or 5 feet above where the freight rail is. So it's essentially all integrated together. It had to be done by one contractor. You couldn't have multiple contractors working in the same sandbox for this thing.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And then were you going to talk about, maybe I missed this, the tunneling and where you are on that, or is that coming up?
No, I can go back to that. We on the Canonware Tunnel, we are, I think I don't have the full stats here, but they're like, I think there are 84 tunnel segments that we have to pour, and that's essentially the floor, the wall, and the roof. And then there's another pour on top of that, and of course you get up and you have earth and then the trail. And we have done, I believe, of 2 of those so far. And so we have a long ways to go. But I would say that the contractor is starting to get their legs under this thing, to understand their productivity, to get this thing moving. We still have some challenges with Cedar Lake Parkway. That's a closure that we're going to have to look at later in the spring of 22. And see how that all fits. But as we progress eastward, hopefully it's going to go a little bit easier, because we have a little width space as we move across Cedar Lake Parkway. Right now, I mean, it is tight. You've got a fence line and a roadway on one side, or a building, and the other side you have freight, and there's really no room to maneuver. And we've been pretty good partners with TC&W. They've been actually allowing the contractor to use the rail on occasion to move their equipment, which has been very helpful. But just that tightness has just been it's been a struggle, just trying to get this thing going. Plus the settlement issues we had that I spoke of earlier, and maybe Mary, you didn't catch all that, but I think hopefully we're behind a lot of the unknowns that we came across, but we still have a lot of digging to do. So, you know, we still have to be bracing ourselves for unforeseens as we progress on this tunnel.
Okay, good. Thanks. Mr. Chair, are we still avoiding making projections about when this line will be open? You know, people ask me that continually, it seems like, and then are somewhat critical of the, you know, what the line, as you can well imagine, because they read the newspaper about all the challenges we face. And so having this presentation, I think, will be very helpful for me to disseminate that, plus any information we can have about projected timing, whenever that's appropriate.
Right. I mean, and I think that the project team working with outside consultants are continuing to work with the contractors to get that timing and the sequencing. We don't want to speculate, because the minute we speculate, that becomes the date you're held accountable to, and we want to ensure that we have a schedule that we can really live by, and not do this. You know, we've had enough schedule changes on this project. If you think about it over the last 10 years, we want to really set it right. And of course, timing is money, so it's schedule and budget. And as Jim pointed out, this is not just the civil contractor; it's the systems contractor, it's the testing. So, you know, you look at some of these pictures we just been reviewing, even some of the bridges. Just one of those bridges alone is a big project. So I'm just kind of struck how, when you look at every element has a big structure. But I think the parts that we're looking at, and you focused on it, the protection barrier and this Kenilworth sequencing of this cut and cover tunnels, that's causing the resequencing need to ensure that we got our arms around mitigating as much as we possibly can the schedule slippage. And I think that now that Kenilworth, maybe the contractors got a pace where they can kind of know what they're doing, we'll be able to more accurately predict the schedule.
Okay, I see Mayor Spano has his hand up. I've got one more question about ROI projections, but I'll come back to that after Mayor Spano asks his question.
Sure, go ahead, Mayor Spano. Jake?
Thanks, Chair. And you know, I also have a few questions, but number one, trail reopenings is something that Mayor Gadd and I brought up back in September, and I just wanted to find out, number one, if there's any update on opening trail sections up as they are made available. I think that was if I remember correctly, Jim, you said, you know, we will be seeking to open these up as we can and as it's possible. And so I'm wondering if you've got updates on any parts of the line that might be resolved in that regard. The other question that I have is a little bit and I'm not sure if this is the time to bring it up, but since Jim sort of brought it up, it feels to me like the two things, the tunnel and the Secant Wall pieces seem to be the big holdup in terms of determining a final budget and a timeline, that those things need to be, that seems to be the major holdup. And I guess my question is, I understand that we don't know, or Met Council staff, I should say, doesn't know when revenue service date will begin, but no sooner than 2024 is what I heard. So my question is this: how much time is the contractor going to need in order to give you the information that you need in order to determine two things: the timeline for the project and the budget for the project? Because I think we've all seen the reports, and Met Council has not been, has been very open and transparent about the challenges the project has had. I appreciate that. But it does give me a little bit of heartburn that I don't know kind of what a plan is for how we get to a timeline and how we get to a final budget? Is that cutting stuff from the line? Is it growing the budget, by finding other revenue resources? And so my two questions are trail openings and what is the plan to get to a plan that gives us those two top line pieces of information? Because I think as CMC members, that's what I feel like I'm being held accountable for is what's the budget, what's the timeline? And I don't really have a good sense of that. So that would be my two questions. Thank you, Jim.
And Jim, before you come in with the actual answer, I will say that Jake, that's the big question, and what I think helped me think about it was not just the complication of the tunnel and the Kenilworth and the protection barrier causing the delay, is how the original contract was really built with the work teams of the civil contractor working kind of oversimplifying it, but from east to west. And now, rather than wait, we actually are kind of resequencing. So it's not just the Canonware Trail; it's the sequencing of all the other elements to ensure that we save as much time as possible. So it's a complicated schedule, and the more I've looked at it, my head starts to hurt and my eyes glaze over. But Jim, I think you've got a pretty good handle as to how we might be able to answer those questions.
Sure. Well, let's take the easy one first. Maybe
Bike
not
trail.
maybe not so easy, but I just checked on this morning, just kind of see status. So on the trail opening, I think I spoke of last time where we were hopeful that we could open up, I think from Beltline over to Wooddale. And then the other segment we were looking at is from the depot in Hopkins over to about 11th, I think at 11th Avenue. And I think from a construction perspective, we're pretty close. There's some fencing that still needs to be tidied up on some of the stretches, but where we're right now, we are involved in getting some agreements. We need to have some agreements in place with Three Rivers and TC&W, the short line that runs through, because long term we have originally when we set up agreements on this project, we didn't contemplate having piecemeal trail openings. So we're going to have to. We're currently navigating through that. And I'd say both parties are willing to work through this, but we have to work through those details. My goal is still to get those segments open. I think we can get them open fairly soon. I'm not sure if we'll make it by the end of the year, as my original goal was, but I'm hopeful if it's not by the end of the year, it's early into 22 for those two segments. And I think that's probably what we're going to have for now. As we progress into 2022, we'll know more about how things are going to progress for other areas of the trails. But that's kind of where we're at right now, Mayor, on that. I don't know if there are any follow-up questions before I go into the other piece. I noticed Councilmember Hunke had a question as well. Does that answer your question as well, Councilmember?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
All right. And just know that I keep on my bike helmets back here. I bike into work every day. I'm an avid biker. I'm really wanting to get these trails open as much as others out there. And so I'm really an advocate as well as trying to get this construction done. In terms of the schedule, so it's complicated, as the chair had mentioned. The two segments that we have talked about where we talk about the tunnel and the corridor protection, if you look at the civil construction contract, there are milestone dates that are associated with those two areas. But the challenge is there's milestone dates tied to other parts of the project as well that the civil construction is doing as well. So we're essentially looking, and I've been frankly in discussions with the contractor for all of this year to figure out what this new schedule for the civil construction is going to be. So it isn't like we're just kind of sitting around waiting for the construction contractor to come to us and what they can do. There's a lot of negotiation involved in getting a schedule because essentially the contractor has leverage. I'll just put it out. They have leverage right now because we've had to insert things into the project for unforeseen conditions in the tunnel and the change order for the corridor protection. And we're heavily involved in negotiating a new schedule with the contractor. And then we also have to negotiate the cost with that. So coupled with that, once I have something that's concrete for the civil schedule, which I'm hopeful to get, in the next, 90, 120 days. I'm just speculating at this juncture because there's still a lot of detail. I'm working on the systems contractor so they can understand their schedule as well. And then I had that other bullet or the other ball there on the earlier slide that talked about testing. We're also looking at ways of how can we mitigate this schedule hit, if you will, to try to rein in revenue services as soon as possible. One of the things we're looking at is doing a phased integration testing program where perhaps we're running trains and testing outside of the tunnel area before the tunnel is actually completed to get for it to get into testing mode. We see that as an opportunity to try to rein in revenue service. And I know this whole part has really been frustrating a lot of people because we don't have a date. We just don't want to come out prematurely with a date and have to redo it again. And we want to try to be as solid as we can with the date in terms of where we're going to get to revenue service on this project. But know that we are in extensive discussions with the contractors. I have got outside help that, frankly, these are the same entities that have helped MnDOT in the past. I've got a company called Venable who is helping us on the legal side of things, and I've got a company called Troner that's helping us on the claim scheduling and cost side of things. And so we have a lot of experts that are involved in this process to get to a conclusion. But unfortunately, we're just not there yet, but we will get there. We will get there.
Just as a quick follow-up, Chair, if I may. So Jim, thank you for that. And I agree. I know you are an advocate of Viking. I'm not, and please don't ever take my questions as being anything other than wanting to get information to share with the community. I guess the part on the budget and the timeline that I will say is that we've kind of been in this pattern for the last several months, certainly going back to maybe almost a year now, it seems like. And I think that what I would like to ask is, and I'm happy to take this request offline if others on CMC aren't interested in this, but I guess I'd like to have a little bit of time to sit down and be able to go through it in a little bit more methodical way with you or others, or perhaps there's a different way to present this data and information that is easier to absorb. I'll confess, I'm not of everybody in this meeting, I'm probably at the bottom of the list in terms of the smartest people in this meeting, but sometimes just presenting data in a different way, whether it's in a visual format or maybe looking at it in a different way, will help me to understand kind of what the challenges are. I'm not suggesting that we don't have challenges. I totally agree that the things that have come up have presented the budget and timeline with challenges. I'm trying to get a better sense of how to understand it and explain it so that people's expectations are met. Because right now, I just have to say, like, when I talk to folks about it, they're like, yeah, it's a big engineering project. It's hard. You guys didn't know it was going to be hard when you started this? Like, why all of a sudden has everything gone dark in terms of the budget and the timeline? So I think finding a better way to tell that story would be helpful, and I'm happy to spend time. However, I don't want to take time, but I am, I do think that it's of value to be able to better and more clearly explain this. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
Yeah. I just go back quickly. It seems to me that it's not too early to start thinking, maybe all of us, and you in particular, Mr. Chair, about how do we talk about the ROI here, which is always difficult with public transportation, whether it's bus transit, bus rapid transit, but we are always constantly working on ways to show the value to the public once things are operational. So, but it strikes me that whether it's with respect to projections or actual operations, once we get up and going, it'd be nice to be able to tell people what we think the ROI is going to be here, if that's even the right kind of expression. But that return on investment, I think, goes well beyond the revenue per rider or the cost per rider or cost per trip. There's that whole systemic sort of value in creating a bigger, broader economy that we should try to figure out how to quantify the value of that too, because that's one of the things we always talked about when Jake and Will and the rest of us that have been involved forever have been working on this. We've been thinking about this as the last leg in this system we're going to create that allows us to really move people around and really have increased productivity in our economy. And so it'd be nice to be able to think about it that way too, to help explain it to people in our respective communities that are probably coming up to others like they are to me and telling me this whole thing is a joke. It's a, you're way overspent and et cetera, et cetera. It's just a lot of anger out there, and it would be nice to be able to be more effective at defending it. And I feel I'm fairly effective, but want to be as effective as I can possibly be.
You are very effective. These are great points, and both mayors, thank you. I agree, and also I see in the chat, agree with Commissioner Fernando that we need to be working together to shape these messages. And we are working now to develop more about the benefits, which are often lost, and when we kind of focus right on this issue of a tunnel or construction timing. But as you pointed out, there's this idea of return on investment, which we did looking at the transit system as a whole as we build out these transit ways, and thinking about the value that's coming from this segment of the Green Line, itself has already resulted in $1.6 billion of construction, either finished or in the ground underway. And I think we're going to try to get more measures as to how those benefits have already been or are going to be achieved. And although this is a higher, longer schedule and at a higher cost, it is still an investment well worth it. And some of these costs are not due to unforeseen. It is due to unforeseen conditions, but it also is costs that would be there, at the very beginning had we known, and still would have been a benefit for reaching this part of the metro. So I agree. We should be thinking about these messages being more transparent. How we talk about some of the unknowns that we're working on is the kind of the gray zone we're in, and I recognize that makes it very challenging and gives fodder for naysayers to say, "Oh yeah, you don't even know." Well, we're working on it, and we don't want to accelerate that and give an arbitrary date, because it's better that we have a firm number and really follow our fiduciary role for our taxpayers, making sure that at least cost, least time as possible. And to do that means that these complicated negotiations, which happen with some of these outside consultants I worked with at MnDOT, they are the best in the country. No solace to think that other projects around the country have these issues, but they do. And sadly, this is when you get these larger projects. And if you look at the New York Times recently, an article which makes us kind of seem very minor league, which I kind of hope we are in this respect. But I think that one of the things we're finding is when you go into the ground, these unknown conditions do have happened. And I wish we had a humongous contingency or whatever we needed, but that would have been prudent even at that time. So I think that there's got to be ways to explain it. And also, as your point, Mayor Hovland, which is totally important, is that this has incredible benefits. Let's not lose sight of what those benefits are, right, what people are going to be achieving, and we can start pointing to that.
Yeah, and don't forget about the benefit to each of those communities along the line. I mean, the economic development that's taken place around our planned TOD work is remarkable. So make sure that gets factored in. I think Irene had a question. I'll get out of the way here.
No need to get out of the way, Mayor. I'm shouting you out in the chat. I just wanted to add, hopefully I'm not putting Sam O'Connell on the spot. We're hearing a lot of narrative, a lot of communications aspects, and so I, with her new position, personally, it's also about energy. Like, what is the energy that we're bringing into the type of narrative we are discussing? Because the possibilities that occur because of this type of resolve, the investment and the, it's about jobs, it's about connecting people to healthcare, it's about the future of climate impacts. And so I'm just very, very hopeful you can see my comments here. I'm really hopefully echoing favorably what others on the call are saying, and I'm not sure if I'm just wanted to acknowledge that Sam has a role, a newer role that may be able to impact this, and something that I've mentioned before. How do we kind of zoom out a bit? You know, it's easy to kind of get into the well, what did we do wrong? What can we do better? Which we should ask, but we should be saying that in alignment with and concert with why we are committed to this, and not just what it has produced, but what's at stake, when we deliver this. And so that is the type of excessive energy you can expect from me, particularly as we get into the new year. And no worries, I follow instructions kinda. And so Sam and others will hopefully steer me appropriately in terms of that kind of narrative direction, that storytelling direction. But that's where I just wanted to echo and support what's been said already, and certainly we're kind of counting on the expertise of Sam and others on the call to really kind of bring this particular topic into fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And this is a great conversation and excellent points. And the promotion that Irene is referring to for our dear friend Sam here is that she has accepted the role as being the director of engagement for the whole.
Was that on the agenda? Did I mess something up?
No,
Okay.
it's not. Just I want to appreciate that that's a good time to kind of honor Sam, who's still going to be engaged in this project, but also in a larger context, and who's I measured with my tape measure from my office to her office now on Robert Street, and it's about 12 feet. So I expect that to be a well-worn carpet for me, and when we get back to the office. But I to your point is that we got to put passion, ideas, and thought toward ensuring that the benefits. You look at in the news today, Optum and United Health just has revenue increases of 10%. This is a growing employment base along this corridor, and it's not lost on us that this is going to help feed the economy. But we have a lot of, we're going to rush through the rest of the program here because we want to make sure this information is shared, and then leave some time for some questions maybe at the end. So why don't, Jim, you kind of jump through the systems and the Franklin piece, and we'll get to the DB.
All right, Mr. Chair.
Statistics.
Yeah.
So next slide.
Mr. Chair, if we get to about 11:20, we're not wrapped up yet. I need to run and do the mayor's minute. So I got to head for City Hall.
You were a fast mayor. Okay, got
For
it.
20 minutes.
Okay.
All right. So this is an image of some of the systems work I spoke of. Again, we're just getting started with that work. We'll be picking up in the springtime. This is the Eden Prairie for a traction power substation. Next slide. So this is just kind of some of the gizmos we're building behind the scenes that, one of the things we have done to mitigate what we think could be a huge cost exposure is we did a change order to have the contractor continue to build out the traction power signal, all that good stuff that's actually going to go on the line, and have that stored here locally. We were just very concerned with the supply and demand unknowns, especially what's going on right now, what's going to be in the future. We really don't know. We decided it was really prudent to continue to build out the equipment and have it ready to install. And so I've got this. This is actually interlocking signal house that's under testing. And next image is, I think this is actually a traction power that's ready for storage here. So that's one of the things we're trying to do to mitigate overall costs here. Got a couple of more images on, I think, on the Franklin facility, and that project is nearly completion. This is the north yard of the maintenance facility up above. Off to kind of the right there is we have a new rail control center enclosure, and we essentially built out the maintenance bays to accommodate, allow our maintenance folks to work on the additional vehicles we're bringing into the system. And then the next image is we have built some additional track on the west side. This is a very tight site to build and to maneuver trains here, but we did the best we could in light of having to take the OMF out of the program from Hopkins area. And so this is going to be an area where we'll be storing trains. I think the last image here is just a inside photo of the new rail control center that was part of this project that we needed to get built out. So that's now in operation and still waiting, of course, for the Green Line extension to be added to this. I think that, I've got a couple of slides on light rail vehicles and go through those pretty quickly. As I indicated, we've got 25 of the vehicles here delivered, and they're going through commissioning. A lot of testing still need to be done here locally before they can get into revenue service. And then got a couple of vehicles still out in Sacramento that are going through their last installation and testing. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, thanks, Jim. Any quick questions for Jim at this point and the team on construction? All right, let's jump. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
just a quick one on this next part of the contract. You know, we had to delay a lot of other things. Are they going to be able to deliver on time and keep up with us now that we know that there's a whole timeline change? Jim?
Yes, Mr. Chair, on that, Commissioner, that's what we're negotiating with the systems contract. So we're keeping close tabs with them, how we're landing on the civil schedule, and the systems is working in tandem to figure out when they're going to deliver. So this piece in terms of getting the equipment produced and having it ready, that's what it's all about. So the systems can be ready to roll once they have site access and they can bring the equipment out to get it installed.
So we'll get an update, I guess, on that very soon as well.
Well, I would just say once we understand those schedules better, we can continue to evolve and get you informed in terms of where we're sitting on schedule. But the systems contractor is well aware of the challenges we have on the civil side of things, and we're trying to develop that system schedule because essentially two schedules we have to develop: the civil reschedule and the systems reschedule. Those need to be done, and then that'll inform where we get to revenue service with that testing piece in there.
Okay.
John, before we jump to you, I did Commissioner Latendresse, did you have a question? You might have had your hand up. I'm trying to track here.
Oh, hey, thanks for that, Chair Zelle. I was just going to make a brief comment. I'm just going to leave it in the chat here, but I just wanted to reinforce, you've said it a few times on this call, and I wanted to thank you for pulling together this information around the dollars in redevelopment that this project has already unleashed. 1.6 billion. And that figure, I think, matters for a few reasons. Number one, it allows us to tell the story about how this project right now already is unleashing benefits for our community, not just at some future date when trains are running and people are moving. Right now, this investment is transforming our communities. It's important, number two, because it speaks to the scale of the investments that are already being unleashed. We oftentimes talk about the scale of this project, but it's unleashed a proportionate scale in redevelopment. And I think number three, for my community in particular, it allows us to tell the story about how these trains are about more than moving people. It's also about how these trains transform our communities. So I just wanted to co-sign that and reinforce that, particularly here in Hopkins, where I live and in the district that I represent, where we are literally seeing not just tunnels being dug and bridges going up, but buildings in places where there've never been buildings before. It's it resonates because people see it happening.
Unlocks real development. Thank you for making that point. Really appreciate the comment. All right, John, we're gonna get some of the recent figures, and I saw a picture of somebody underwater, but that was not part of your presentation. So anyway, on to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair and community members. All right, so slide 51 here. So here are the achievements as of September 30th. And here we are tracking the amount of dollars spent with DBE small businesses. So one of the things here is that, you know, our 3 construction contracts are continuing to exceed their DBE goals. So that's always something positive for us to have and see. Next slide, please. So here on slide 52 is the civil contract, as Jim shared earlier. It's about 60% complete, and the prime contractor, this contract continues to build upon their DBE participation that has accumulated over time. And this will definitely help out later in the project where there may be less work or opportunities for DBEs to be involved in. This is a very helpful strategy because once we get to the project, we all know that a lot of the work has been done and there's less opportunity for DBEs to participate. So next slide, please. And then for the systems contract, when we meet with our systems contractor, they are employing a similar strategy to help build a buffer for that. So the contract is only at about 2%. So that's encouraging that they are using this strategy that has been shown to work. Next slide, please. And then the Franklin contract is pretty much complete. Our office is reviewing the final payments to DBEs and confirming all of the billed and paid amounts. Once that's done, we'll have a final achievement for this particular contract and accounting for the various type of credits that can be counted towards DBE participation. But with 19%, I feel pretty confident that we will be exceeding the goal, if not just meeting it. So that is the Franklin project. Next slide. And here are the disaggregated summary of the DBE commitments for all of the construction contracts. In our quarterly meetings with the prime contractors, we are asking that if there are opportunities in change orders for more participation from POC DBEs, it would greatly help support the council's equity goals for our region. Next slide. And this slide hasn't changed too much, but I do want to continue to highlight that it is encouraging to see that the majority of contract dollars are going back to Minnesota-based DBEs and our local economy here. Slide 57, workforce. Okay, so we're gonna dive into workforce. And before we do that, I also want to acknowledge the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, who has put in a lot of effort into monitoring these construction contracts and working collaboratively with the council and the contractors to make sure that we can achieve these outcomes that we are wanting from this project. Slide 58 here. As you all know, the recent 35W and 94 project is done, and the prime contractor has transferred as many women and POC workers as possible. And this is meaningful because those workers that are transferred are being retained. This means that they are able to build upon their careers and gain more experience and ultimately be able to retire on time with their non-minority colleagues. So next slide, please. And here you can see the cyclical up and down of the construction season slowing down towards the colder time of the year. And let me see. The women participation seems to have plateaued at 8%, but what's encouraging is the prime contractor is working with their subcontractors and planning engagement activities for the 2022 construction season. And they're trying to engage and attract more women into the industry overall. And this is something that's not just for this particular project, but they're working with lots of the other construction unions and organizations to, help get us closer to the goal. And there's a lot of different programs out there. So this is not just for this project, but it's for our region overall. Next slide, please. And here you can see some of those transfers equating into a higher outcomes. So the POC participation has climbed over the summer. And we are hopeful that the contractor is able to maintain this and continue to build upon this to get us closer to the 32% POC goal. Next slide. So slide 61 here is the disaggregated number of hours worked. We can see more in detail the demographics and where the hours fall into which populations. For women, the white women still represent the majority of hours worked, but it is encouraging to see that Black and Native American women participation is growing. For POC participation, a large part of that participation that was increased have come from Hispanic and Black men that have been brought onto the project. So, we hope that they are continuing and able to continue working throughout the rest of the project and stay with the companies that are doing the various scopes of work along the alignment. Next slide. All right. Slide 62 here is the systems contract. And as I shared before, it's only about 2%. So the workforce activities here have been sporadic. The prime contractor, when we meet up with them, they anticipate more workforce participation happening in spring of 2022. So with the small amount of hours accumulated, it's hard for us to put together a chart showing activities over time. So we didn't do a chart for that, but we do have a disaggregated chart or table. So next slide, please. And something to note is the work hours here are coming from a couple of electrical contractors who've been installing communications equipment and electrical equipment at the stations when they have been able to. So they are trying to get in as much work as possible when the schedule and opportunity arises. Next slide. Here, the Franklin contract is, as I shared before, nearing its end, or I think it's probably at the end. And here for the gold columns, those are the cumulative amounts, and those are most likely going to be the final numbers for this project. Next slide. Something I do want to note is through the monthly good faith efforts meetings that we've been having with the prime contractor and the Department of Human Rights, we've been trying to find different ways and working with them to increase women participation, and them in turn talking to their subcontractors. So we were able to increase women participation in the last few months here. Of course, this 19.2% achievement helps, but the overall amount is still at 9.3. But it is good to see, though, because in 2017, some people believe that this 20% goal was unobtainable. But here we can see that we are making progress towards the goal and it is within reach. Next slide, please. And then here for the POC participation, it is a little bit lower than we would like. The Department of Human Rights have met with the prime contractor to do a review of their participation and the activities throughout this. And it's kind of a post-mortem type of meeting that they're having with the contractors to see, what can we learn? And, for the prime contractor, this isn't the only construction project that they're working on. So they want to build a long-term relationship with them, and of those practices that has been helpful to increase participation, they want to encourage the contractor to carry on those practices and then look for different ways and more opportunities to get subcontractors who may have smaller workforces or may not be as committed as the prime contractor or not responsible as the prime contractor to participate in these activities for outreach and encouraging more participation in the overall construction industry. So next slide, please. So here is the disaggregated data for the Franklin project. Overall, this project only accumulated about 100,000 1,000 hours compared to the civil contract and the systems contract. This is relatively small, but as we say, every little thing helps, because it's bringing more experience to those workers, and then also bringing more dollars to our community, because these workers, they're going back to their community and bringing those wages back into their community. All right, well, I think this is my last slide for DBE and Workforce. Chair, I hand it back to you.
Thanks, John. I know you covered a lot of material, and it's also not lost on any of us that your work and that of the advisory committee really does make a difference in knowing that we're working with a lot of partners on actual strategies to improve that, and certainly encouraging what we've seen over the past few months in a number of areas. I know we ran through that quickly. Any questions from any of our committee members for John?
I've got a question, Mr. Chair, and maybe a request of John.
Sure.
And I'm bringing this to you from a perspective of, we've got a person in our community who started a DBE. He's from West Africa. He was a engineer for 3M. He ran one of their plants, really a highly qualified guy, started his own signage and striping business, and has been doing a lot of work with MnDOT. But it strikes me that he's an example of maybe what John is talking about inferentially, and the data that he's presenting is that this whole standard of how you go about getting DBEs involved to a greater extent, at least in my experience, depends in part upon what they're able to, how they're able to purchase product that they need to do the work they're doing. When somebody that might be competing with them is able to purchase product at 1/3 the cost or half the cost, and so they're sort of inherently disadvantaged in the supply pipeline in being able to make an effective bid to allow the prime contractor to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to use you. And that's, as I understand, just sort of a good faith standard that the primary contractor has to honor. And I know when I talk to MnDOT, they're saying that they're always falling far short of their goals on DBE participation. And it strikes me that there needs to be some fundamental reform in how these jobs are approached. And in the circumstance where these minority contractors are having to pay more for supplies, that we need to figure out how to adjust for that. And it can't just all be about price. And I maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but what I'd like John to think about is how do we improve the underlying system and the commitment to DBE? Because it strikes me that it ought to be more than just a good faith effort to commit to DBE. There ought to be some strong requirements around it that we sort of back up. And if we want to lift people up and give them a chance to really succeed, we've got to take into account the pricing issues that they're facing as small contractors.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, how does Edina do that? What are Edina's numbers like, and how do you guys adjust?
Not very well. I mean, I think I've had this fellow has bid on some contracts over there, but he's his pricing is higher, and so sometimes he'll get some work and sometimes he won't. But I think MnDOT has been the biggest support area for him. MnDOT's worked hard at this very problem of trying to figure out how to adjust a DBE participation based on the pricing differential that these DBEs are facing on the products they have to buy from suppliers like 3M, So PCL or, some of the other big contractors go in there and buy the stuff at 60% discount to what the DBE has to pay, or 50%, How are they supposed to be able to effectively bid a project?
Interesting.
That's my final comment before I head for City Hall. It's something but I think it's a serious, I think John did a great job here, but I think there's room for improvement, and we got to think about our standards and how we're going to, if we're intent on doing this, let's do it. Let's figure out how to do it.
And it's a continuing conversation, so I know you have to run, Mayor. Thank you for participating, and thanks for raising this. And I think that's something that, along with MnDOT and the Department of Administration, and maybe even certainly with counties, we're thinking about the whole federal procurement process. Sometimes the regulation actually gets in the way for what we're trying to do to advance minority-owned.
And I'm trying to work on it on that end too. But
Yeah,
thanks,
yeah.
Mr. Chair. I know that you know all about this from your experience at MnDOT. And really, we're blessed to have you have both these hats that you've worn over the last half
Well,
dozen.
MnDOT, I've learned a lot, and one of us we're trying to carve up smaller contracts, but as you say, pricing materials, that alone is a issue. So I want to give Sophia a quick chance to give us in our last few remaining minutes some outreach updates, and then we'll let people have their days back. Go ahead, Sophia.
Thanks, Chair. If we can go to the next slide. I just want to highlight the work of our 3 dedicated outreach coordinators and communication staff in informing the public about our construction activities, as well as discussing the benefits of the project. So we've been doing quite a few tours, basically through the spring, summer, and fall. This is highlighting one in October, seeing the Canonware Tunnel. We've really found that bringing people on site to see the scope of activities and really understand the complexities has gone a really, really long way. We're kind of finishing up tours for the season just because of inclement weather. We ended kind of our tour schedule with the general public with a group of preschoolers that'll kick off some of our efforts next year to also engage youth in this project that will be also for them when it opens. So the outreach coordinators are really essential in helping really to have these discussions with the community about how wonderful this project is. And if you remember back to the video, that was James narrating that in a studio with a script, but in the field with the public, just having those discussions. And we've heard, if you could go to the next slide. We really try to make these experiences special for folks and do kind of like the extra things. And one of the things that we do is after a tour, we send photos of the tour participants because everybody likes to see themselves with construction hats and vests. And that has also just kind of solicited some feedback from the folks that have joined us. And we've actually got quite a few thank yous, and just highlighting a few here for the committee. And one in particular, I'll just read part of the quote. Is this individual was just really impressed by the tour and sent this to us from Theodore Roosevelt. Far and away, the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. And that was, that as we get into the whole thing of things and hear all the things that Jim and the team are working on, this really resonated with me, and is part of what the outreach group does to connect with folks. And explain exactly that. So next slide, please. In addition to the tours, we continue to have virtual meetings, go to community meetings themselves. And one of the biggest pieces of outreach work is just meeting with property owners and tenants that are along the corridor as we just do construction to make things work the best that they can for them. Our construction communications still continue to be an essential piece of our work as well. We have at least about 8,000 people opening and reading our update as we're sending out, as well as following our tweets, and about over 15,000 people coming to our website to gather information, maybe on detours or general construction things every month. So we will continue to have a robust outreach program throughout the winter, and really looking forward to as next spring as well to lean more into the tours and also engage more of our students in that process as well. As with some sites a little bit kind of getting really finished in a lot of ways, you can bring those younger kids out as well. So with that, if there's any questions, otherwise I know we only have about a minute left in the meeting.
Thanks, Sophia. You and your team have done just an amazing job, and I look forward to more tours and engagement. And I know we have a number of virtual meetings as well. So I just want to, because we're just about to end, that previous slide showed some dates for future meetings. Given the robust conversation we've had, we really want to maybe meet more often than every quarter. I don't know how others feel about it, but this is what a schedule would look like if we do it every other month. And there's just so much we need to talk through, particularly as we talked about these communication framework toward the benefits And as we start, working through this resequencing negotiations, as we look toward an opening date, this next year is really important in terms of building out the schedule and understanding where the project is heading. So, if there's any concern about increasing the number of meetings, let me know. We can always meet on the side. Everybody knows how to find us. And with that, it is 11:30. Any late breaking comment, question, thoughts? All right. Well, listen, thank you all for this incredibly valuable meeting, and I really appreciate we're in it together. And I think, Theodore Roosevelt said it. We're doing important work here, and you never lost on us that important work is not always easy, and so we're putting our shoulders into it, and we're all going to feel grateful for the hard work of our staff and all of our policymakers and frankly, all of our communities coming together to advance this really incredible project. So thanks, everyone, and enjoy the day. It's Infrastructure Week, so happy holidays. If we don't see you, have a great holiday season.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Charlie. Bye.